Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Transcendence Talks podcast. Today's guest is a friend of mine, Dr. Jason Giles, who is a board certified addictionologist. And he's getting ready to do some really cool things. He's getting ready to do a TED Talk. He's got a book that's in its final stages in editing. And he has a really unique perspective on addiction that he's going to be sharing with us today. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you, Christy. How are you?
Yeah. Good to see you too. I'm so good. Well,
Excellent.
Kind of. It's been, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if you guys are feeling it. There's some weird, electromagnetic currents or something happening that's messing with a lot of things. Devices.
Yep, it's true. Yeah. I'm on the backup internet myself. There's something going on. I'm with you for sure.
Yeah, it's weird. But anyways, besides that, life is good. So I'm so glad to have you on. Addiction is something that's been near and dear to my heart my whole life. Personally, because I grew up in a house with an addicted parent, and as a result of that, dated men who were addicted, and as a result of that, developed a very good pattern of becoming a really good codependent.
And professional codependent, right?
Oh yeah, no, I have a really long resume, that leaked into my marriage, and my husband and I are now grateful to be healing and on that road of recovery together. And so I really admire people like yourself, who have walked that road and then have turned around and helped others. So I'd love to hear more about just what inspired you to get into the work that you do.
That's a great question. Yeah. So it's interesting, these early formative influences. So I grew up in an alcoholic home. I had alcoholic dad. And I remember knowing that really young, very, very, very young, that it wasn't normal. This wasn't drinking to relax or drinking for fun. He drank because he had to, and passing through the stages of grouchy and then into happy and then back to, mess. So I knew that. And I suppose codependency, which for people who don't know what that is, it's you seek validation and love in taking care of others. Like I'm okay if you're okay, and sort of the classic. And I remember that. I remember trying to hold the family together. And I also remember saying that I was not going to go the way of my dad. I was not going to become an alcoholic, which is a funny thing to say. It's a very odd thing to say when you're young. Probably means something when you, more than just that you're exposed to it. In any case, my path was academics, and I went to college and then medical school, and then post medical school training, I trained to be an anesthesiologist. And at the time, there were a couple of weird things going on in the country. There was a national shortage of anesthesiologists and a shortage of training positions, or rather trainees. So it's already a hard specialty, but at the time I was going through it, it was just piled on. We still had all the cases to do, but there were about half as many of us to do them. So I got great training. I had terrific training, but back to the codependency, I never really got good at asking for help. I'm the one doing the helping, all the way up to being a doctor. So medical doctor. So I'm trying to remember if I might have along the way with a math problem or something, asked for help, but not usually. I usually just sort of figure it out. And so the way I figured it out when I was in my very last year of training, and I was over with the workload and with the stuff that you see in the hospital taken care of. It was a trauma hospital, so we had all kinds of stuff, all kinds of really tough cases. I used fentanyl, and I used it one day after work, and it was everything I hoped it would be. It was relief, and it was comfort, and it was safety, and it was freedom from all the pressure. And then I put it away, and I didn't do it again for almost a couple of months. But I had this secret. I had this solution, but also I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't, right? It was one more thing that I couldn't talk about. And so eventually, whatever my explanation was at the time, the stress or the pressure, I used it again. And then if you plotted a graph of how often, it just got more and more frequent. So it was, once a month or less, then once a week, and then a couple times a week, and then every day. And then And then I couldn't wait until work was over. I'm watching the clock, and I'm in withdrawal, and I'm feeling terrible, and I'm trying to hold it together. And that went on for a little while, not too long. I mean, the stuff that I was using is ultra high potency. It's right out. It's pharmaceutical. It's not what came out later. When I told the story years ago, I used to have to repeat the word fentanyl because people would look, what's that word? I've never heard that word before. But now, of course, everyone knows what it is.
Yeah.
And one day when I was not sure if I was going to able to go on, I couldn't tell anybody, I couldn't stop, I couldn't get any relief, and I was. I didn't have any plans to kill myself, but if a giant meteor had landed on me, that would have been great. And I was thinking about it for sure. And I got a call from my department chairman, which for those who don't know, the residents don't usually get a call from the department chairman. There's like 20 levels, or not that many, but there's a bunch of levels of administration between me and the boss. And what he told me that day is that they knew what was going on, and that he was glad that he caught me before I died. I didn't know then, but now I know that that's the most common presentation for an anesthesiologist using narcotics, is to wind up dead, whether in the call room or at home. And he said, if you voluntarily join this program, they'll take care of you. You'll get sober or get cleaned up or whatever he said. And then when you're all done, you can come back, and we want you to work here because you're a great doctor. And I didn't really believe him, but I believed that he believed that that was possible. And I was out of options. I didn't have any better plans. So I took the deal, and I went through detox, and then eventually I went to a treatment program, and then I learned what was actually going on. And I worked for a little while just as a general doctor while I was trying to figure out what my next step is. But ultimately, everything happened exactly as he said. I went back to the hospital. I finished my training. I was there for another year. And then I worked as a cardiac anesthesiologist, which is what I'd been trained for. And then I got a call. So sober a few years when I finished. And then I got a call from a guy I met many years ago who had opened a treatment center in Southern California. And he'd been following along with what had happened to me. And he said, we really could use your help down here. And I'm like, I work in an OR. I'm not. And he said, just try it. Just please try it. And it turned out that was exactly the job that I was built for, which is to do that. And that's what I've been doing for the last, I guess, 20 or 21 years is addiction medicine. I went and got boarded in that after anesthesia. And now over 25,000 patients later, it's been the best possible move that I could have made from a professional standpoint, personal mission, everything else. It's I bumped into an anesthesiologist from those days not long ago, and I'll just say that I don't miss the OR. I don't miss doing that job. It was great and fun, but it's much better watching people. You do it, watching people change their lives. So. Yeah, long answer to the question, but that's how I wound up here.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's incredibly rewarding. I don't think I've been in psychotherapy a long time, almost 2 decades, and I don't think I've seen more real transformation happen than in the recovery rooms, where you see people. I mean, sometimes dying, distended stomachs, liver failure, and to watch people come out of the darkness and.
Sure.
To watch their bodies, their minds, their spirits start to heal, to watch their families start to recover together. I mean, there's really nothing more rewarding than that. But I mean, you've watched the process of addiction, the conceptualization of addiction, and what that means for people evolve over decades.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've watched that evolve too. I mean, at first it was looked at as this disease of like or this conceptualization of you're just a bad person, or it's moral failing.
Yeah.
And then it went into the choice model and the disease model. But you and I had talked, and I think we both agree there's still problems with all of those conceptualizations.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, from your perspective and with all your experience, where are those issues that you see today, and where is it evolving?
Well, you're absolutely right, and it's the classic, five blind men or blind people trying to describe an elephant. Right. And one says, this is a tree. And the other one says, no, this is a snake. And the other one says, no, this is a rope. No, this is a wall. Depends on what part of the elephant you're touching, if you can't see the whole elephant. And so in the early days of trying to get I feel for the people trying to explain this, and I'm coming late to the game, but back in the 1950s when they were trying to explain, why would you do that? I mean, even my story that I just told, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, sure, the job was stressful, but why would you risk your own life? And why would you, it defies explanation why someone should wind up, trapped in a bottle or on something like fentanyl. And so they tried to come up with things. And in the early days, they said, well, it's a moral problem, and you're weak character. And if you were more upstanding and upright, then you would just have self-discipline and say no, and then you wouldn't have a problem. Or you could even maybe not drink so much. That's what they would say. If you went to the doctor, it was obvious you had a drinking problem back then in the 20th century, they would say, well, try to cut back, as if you could drink a little less. And honestly, as if you hadn't tried that already many, many times. There's so many times I tried to quit on my own. I just couldn't. So that's how it got started. And then toward the end of the 20th century, there had been a lot of research funding, congressional approved, National Science Foundation and so forth, funding NIDA, a bunch of other government institutions and universities. And they're trying to solve the problem. They're trying to get to the problem, and they didn't have anything. They didn't come up with a magic pill. They didn't come up with a solution. There's no part of the brain. I remember taking a patient back to the operating room, and the job of the anesthesiologist is to wheel the patient back. And this guy was going in for his second cardiac bypass operation. And when you smoke cigarettes, blood vessels tend to get clotted off, and that's why he needed surgery the first time. But he didn't quit smoking after surgery, so the new replacement blood vessels clotted off, and they needed to be replaced a second time. And as I was wheeling him back, and he said, "Hey doc, when I'm in there, can you tell the surgeon to cut out the part of me that still wants to smoke?" Right? But we don't have that part. There's no place. They were going to wrap up the research funding, and a paper came out in the late 1990s saying it's a disease and it's in the brain, and just give us more time and more research dollars, and we'll figure it out. And that became the way we talked about it. We talked about it as if it were. And part of it was to say, it's not your fault. This would happen to anyone. And it's a disease. And so, unfortunately, if you ask people if they would rather be thought of as weak-willed or mentally ill, it's not much of a choice, right? It's kind of, and they can't both be true, or maybe they can't both totally be true. And then we've had some other stabs at it. Johann Hari had a great speech on a TED Talk, actually. And he talks about the disconnection that we feel in the late stages of addiction. And his solution for it, based on some studies with rats called Rat Park, are that we just had connection. And while that's true in my story, probably if I could have called you up back then and said, "Hey, Christy, I got something to tell you," maybe I would have been able to get off of that merry-go-round of hell. But the truth is, it matters what the connection is. It depends on who we're connecting to. You connect to the wrong crowd, or to people that support your use, enablers, they call them sometimes in the field, and that connection is maybe deadly. So it can't be that. It's not disease. It's not weak will. And so I was actually invited to give a TED Talk, and I started thinking about what this is. Like, what is this? Okay, I'm going to share my experience. And the way I think of it, I think of it, so everyone I've ever taken care of was not trying to hurt himself. He was not trying to get fired or divorced or embarrassed. He's not trying to even become dependent. It was a strategy to manage that got out of hand. That's how it goes for everyone. No one says,
just trying to feel better.
To be an alcoholic, I know no one says that. It's not on anyone's to-do list. So, but what drives you to take these great risks? What drives you to do these things that are ultimately, or maybe that are self-destructive in the beginning, but then turn into these big problems? And then how do you get well? So if you're in trouble, how do you make it? In my case, 27 years afterwards, never went back to that. How do you explain that? If my brain is busted, or if they're, did I develop a character? It just doesn't make any sense. So
yeah. And the disease model, I just want to interject. I think it's compelling. I think it's a compelling model. Like,
why?
The way that I learned it, was that it's a disease because once you cross that line into addiction, where your brain is now hijacked enough to confuse the drug or the drink for survival, right? Because in the limbic system, in that center part of the brain, and you and I talked about this, it's the 3 F's, right? It's food, fighting, and fornicating, or the other F, right? That are good for our survival. And so because the chemicals, the dopamine, the serotonin, the norepinephrine, whatever it is that you're ingesting are so refined and powerful, they confuse the brain into thinking that it's the highest priority for your survival. And once the brain makes that distinction, you've now moved into addiction, or dependency. And so now, because of this misclassification of survival value, your capacity to choose in your prefrontals is hijacked by your limbic system. So you can't choose, you can't stop. So that's how I've always understood it. I know. Let's
I
talk
mean,
about where the flaw is in that.
yeah. Well, eventually you do, right? If you don't die,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't drink yourself to death, then
Mm-hmm.
eventually you stop. And so, in fact, most people stop. There's a natural history of alcoholism. There's a book by George Vaillant written 50 years ago with that title, Natural History of Alcoholism. And so, if you develop alcoholism, it has a course, and it'll kill you unless you stop. So it diverges at the tail end, which is to say you either die or you get the plug in the jug, as they say. But you can't stay drunk for your whole life because it
No.
corrodes your insides and destroys your brain. And you're right. When the opposite of so the substance provides relief, the withdrawal or removal of the substance provides or causes withdrawal symptoms, and they give you the opposite. So in the case of opiates, let's stick with that one. Opiates make you feel safe and you're not suffering. You feel like everything is okay. And the flip side, when they go away, you feel like I'm in danger. This is bad. I can't make it anymore. I'm going to die. And so when you have a solution, which is going to make you get better, well, then you're, of course, it becomes objective number one is to get rid of that feeling.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a training loop. So you learn when I feel the way I don't want to, I can take this substance and change the way I feel. When the substance level drops, you're going to feel that way. And yeah, when you're drinking to manage the feelings from not drinking, you're in real trouble, right?
Yeah.
You
Mm-hmm.
drink in situations that are uncomfortable, but then lots of time passes between them and you're not in alcohol withdrawal, drinking to deal with the alcohol withdrawal. It may be a different kind of problem, but at least you're not caught in the jaws of the monster, as it were. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And so, but how do you explain, right? And if you think about relapse happens when you're sober, and getting sober happens when you're under the influence of the drug, or the
Well,
substance.
and if you go to AA, right, they'll tell you that the disease is always active. You're always an alcoholic. You're just in recovery or you're not in recovery. And so the disease process is still going on even when you're sober.
It's what they say,
What
but
they
then
say.
it's what you say. But if you hang around long enough, you'll talk to people who used to have a problem and then they don't. I mean, this is taboo in AA, and we pretend like once a pickle, you can't go back to
Mhm.
being a cucumber,
Right.
and that's what you hear in all sorts of aphorisms like that. And for most people, that's probably true. When
Yeah.
you lose the handle, you're probably not going to get it back. That's probably true for most people, but it's not true for everybody. And so you have to come up with a description of what this problem is that includes that. So your description has to include people who stay abstinent the rest of their lives and never go back to it. It has to
Mm-hmm.
include people who are abstinent for a while and then they try it and they realize they can't, and then they stay off, right? And everything
Yeah.
in between. So, although it's pretty rare to have a catastrophic life collapse and then be able to manage it afterwards. So, we want to make sure your listeners don't think, well, Dr. Giles said it's okay to just drink right after I got sober. What I'll say is, if it's okay for you, then it's okay. But you have to be honest about what that is. Does that make
Yeah. Well,
sense?
and that's the tricky thing is
Yeah.
the honesty with self, in every program of recovery, whether you go through AA or not. I mean, this is a disease of, well, I guess I shouldn't use the word disease right now, but it is a thinking loop that causes a pattern of denial and justification and minimization of the issue.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's
The
tricky.
story is bent to fit the circumstances.
Hmm.
So, okay, I'm gonna use this fentanyl. So what story do I need to make up to make that okay? For me, it was pressure at work and the strain and the hours and so forth. That was my story. Afterwards, that's why it's hard for me to tell that story, because afterwards, on the back end of it, I have a great life and have been blessed to be part of the lives of so many people, helping them, and it's absurd. If you said, well, what if you're under a lot of stress right now? Would you do that again? Not in your life. I mean, not
Yeah.
a chance. I've been, I've raised kids and all that stuff. So not a chance. There's not a chance. So we change. We can learn and grow and see things. Not to say that there may be some circumstances that are so stressful that I might reach for an old solution. I can imagine that that's possible. But however we're going to describe this problem, it has to include all of that. You can't
Yeah.
say, well, it's a disease, except you can get better, and right, except these people got better. I mean, it has to be something more than that. And so I think that the human and all, not just humans, but all creatures, that the drive to feel safe. Oops, look at that. To feel safe and to feel like you belong and to feel like you're part of and to feel like you have choices, right? You have options. That is really the essence of being alive.
Yeah.
If you ask people, well, what do you want, Christy? What do you really want? If you press people, they usually say, I just want to be happy. That's what they say. Right? And that seems superficial, but I think it's true. I think people just want to be happy. What that means depends on the circumstances. When you're a little kid, you want to get presents for Christmas. When you're a mom, you want to see your kids get presents for Christmas. So things change, right? We change as time goes on. But ultimately, the drive to be safe and belong, and it is every creature, every human being has that, and it's why I use drugs. It's why when I talk to my patients, they say, "Oh, I just want to have fun." But if you scratch a little bit and ask the why and what was going on, you'll get to, I felt different. I felt separate. I felt scared. I felt, lonely. And that's always the reason, I wanted to be cool. That's another way of saying I wanted to fit in.
And so,
These things. Yeah, go ahead.
do you believe that that initial rupture, separation, trauma is at the root underlying all addictions? That feeling unsafe in some way.
It's the feeling of being separate from how you want to feel. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And then there are ways to get to feeling like you belong and like you fit, but they're risky and they're not guaranteed and they take a lot of work and they take a lot of time. So if you want to feel like you belong, well, you have to act like you belong for a while until you're accepted by the group. Move into a neighborhood, you have to figure out the ways and you figure out how to participate, and then pretty soon someone will bring you a cake from across the street or whatever, or come over and have a barbecue, and then you're starting to meet people, and then it's a silly example, but then you become part of, right? You become part of something.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, that's effort. In the beginning, maybe I don't know these people and maybe they're not going to like me, and I moved to this house and I don't know if they're going to, right? So we can imagine the worst, but then we have to go through the anxiety of connection and of being part of before we find out, oh, well, they're just like me. And I have a lawnmower and he needs to borrow a lawnmower. Our kids both go to the same school or whatever. And then you start to build life. But if you can't get past that initial anxiety, then you look for other ways to manage your feelings. And because the dislocation from how you want to feel is just too painful. So that might be a drink, right? Might be a drink, and it works. So that yes, you're right. It's and now I don't know. Somebody's going to write in or send an email or something and say, I was having the best day of my life and I wanted to add some cocaine on top of it, right? How to make a good day better. And I would submit that even I don't buy it. If things are that great, then you're not, in this example, you're not adding cocaine to your life. You're
Right.
You're just not. Right.
No. And I mean, I also want to say that this wears a lot of hats, I mean, not just substance use or abuse or addiction, but like we talked about before, codependency. It comes in the form of people pleasing. It comes in the form of overworking, high achievers, process addictions like gambling. I think this initial rupture and the solution can wear a lot of hats that are addictive and maybe not even classified that way by standards or society standards.
Yeah, they're not. They don't pick up the social ostracism or the right. It's not. It's they're more acceptable, right? Acceptable. I mean, workaholism is probably the classic. The right. Dad's at the office still. He's working late. He's working on the weekends, or mom is got two jobs, and not to say that sometimes you don't have to work to make ends meet. I've certainly been in that situation. Many of us have. But I'm saying continuing to build the financial wall long past when it's thick enough, right? Working for the deal, working for the, for its own sake until it takes on a life of its own and can't work on. I mean, I knew a guy who was on that work example. I knew a guy who was an oil man. He was in the oil drilling business, extraordinarily successful. And that did not stop him from being every waking hour on the phone, making another deal. Because once he had a lot of money, then he just kept making more money. He kept, right? Yeah. And until his wife had it, he was just working constantly. And so she demanded a day away from the office and away from the phone and away from deals. He was gonna relax, and so he obviously agreed. And so they had a boat and they went out on their boat out in the ocean. And she made sure that it was very far away from the shore. So there were no cell towers and no cell service. And right. So he could just decompress because she saw it was bad for him. And she's up on the top deck and he's not there. He's somewhere in the boat. It's a big boat, but somewhere in the boat. So she goes looking for him and she finds him on the back of the boat down by the engine. And he's on a satellite phone talking on the phone. So she loses it. She takes the phone. That's a big phone back then, throws it overboard and stomps off. And he watches this thing go, right? I don't know, thousands of dollars, this phone sink into the ocean. And he looks at her going up the stairs and he reaches in the cabinet and pulls out the other one.
Wow. It's insidious. It really is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. It can be all kinds of things. And yeah, I mean, listen, it gets to be a touchy subject with some people, but it could be your phone, right? It can be the game on your phone. I'm reading this book right now about the what's it called, engineering addiction, and it's about the gaming industry, about the slot machines and how they're built to hold our attention and pull us into that space where we're sort of having a transcendent experience, if that even makes sense, on a slot machine. But people describe just being in the zone, and it can be the same engineers in that are working on the slot machines in Vegas are also working on the TikTok and Instagram and those things, so that the next, maybe it's the next one, and then the kids have a term for that, right? Where you just spend all day on the phone scrolling through,
yeah,
or brain rot, yeah. So yeah, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be substances. So
there's this common thread, right, that you address in your book, in your TED Talk. What's at the heart or the root of this? I'd love to hear more about how you conceptualize these things.
So I think our drive to feel better is universal. Everybody has that, but the route that you take to get there is the problem, or the solution. So a lot of people know this already, but when we learn something, the brain gets very practiced at doing that thing until it becomes automatic. The example I give is riding a bicycle, right? Well, most people in America can ride a bicycle, and most haven't ridden a bicycle this week, and many for a long time. And sometimes you get people who haven't ridden a bicycle in years, but they say like riding a bicycle, right? So once you can do it, you can do it. You don't have to relearn how to ride a bicycle after you already know how. And when you get really good at managing your feelings a certain way, whether it's with learning to tap dance and you become good at that and you get the rewards for being a good tap dancer, or ballet, or anything, right? And any skill that you acquire that's fun and satisfying and produces results, you have if you can play golf, you can probably play golf forever, even if you don't play every week or even very often. So once you learn to manage your feelings with a substance, you get really good at that. And that routine gets automatic. We talked about that with the limbic system. Yeah. So you have a good compass. This is why I like to think of the brain that wants to point you toward feeling good. That's the compass. But the map is the problem. So if the route that you're taking to get to feeling, it always points to the same spot, which is safe and happy and part of. But the ways that you go to get there, if you go through Cocaineville to get to feeling safe and powerful,
yeah,
that's a problem. You can see that that's going to turn into a problem. So good compass, bad map, and people just need a new map.
Jason, I love this. I love this because this takes the shame out of addiction. It's like, hey, you're not broken. You don't have a disease. This drive, this desire to feel better is absolutely biologically adaptive. You just chose the wrong road. And that simplifies something that's
it's good,
really
right?
Complex. It is good. I love this.
It's so simple. And I hope we say that about people. We're like, yeah, he needs a new map, because that's all it is. You still have responsibility, so it doesn't take away responsibility or accountability from people. And you can't do that. You can't say, well, it's not your fault. You just drink. I heard a guy say, I drink because my wife won't stop crying. Right, which is just so sad, and obviously it's not true either. It's not true, because he doesn't have to drink, and probably she's crying because she doesn't like what's happening to him. Right, those two things go together. Yeah. I'm glad you like it. I think it's when I put it together, I was like, you have to do something about it. and makes sense why your life looks like it does if you want to change it.
So let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, Cocaineville is not the map, but what is? I mean, what's that path back to? And I guess this question's twofold because you had talked about disconnection and connection to the wrong people. And I do feel like there is this common thread in any addictive disease, whether it's workaholism or cocaine, that there's a disconnection from self. Like we can no longer see what's real and true for us. There's a level of denial. There's disconnection from our own emotions because our tolerance has been very diminished to really being able to feel and allow those emotions to move through our body. And so I guess I'm curious, what is the map and does it lead us back home, to ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So the map is both a metaphor, and it's a metaphorical map, but it's also physical, it's structural, and it is in the brain. So these brain disease guys were close. The problem is in the brain, and it's because of these learned habits. We used to call them habits before, but even before we called it a disease. We'd say you have a drinking habit or a smoking habit or a gambling habit. And a habit is something that is easier to do than not to do, right? It's something that is something that we have a sense of automation about, almost does itself. It's not, but it's easy to do it. And there's some videos going around not long ago with the morning routine, right? People doing the morning routine, and that took on a life of its own. But most of us have a routine in the morning, right? For most people, they wake up and check their phone now. That's the beginning of their routine. But whatever it is, brush your teeth and get some coffee or tea or something, and whatever that is, you probably do just about that same thing every day. So that is a map. That is a pathway on the map. And what makes it is they figured out a long time ago that when you activate a certain pathway in the brain and you do that repeatedly, the brain adapts and makes that pathway faster. It makes it more automatic and slicker. And protein that wraps around the neurons called myelin. And the myelin is like insulation on a wire. Like you can't see it on here. There's a wire on this microphone. There it is.
Yeah.
There's metal inside of it, but there's rubber or plastic on the outside. And the myelin is like that. So it makes and that's how the sound from here gets to you. Goes down the wire. If the wire were uncovered, there'd be a short and it wouldn't get there as reliably. So that's how the brain works. It builds these connections, these neuron connections that make the signal go through much easier with much less energy, much less thought, much less effort. And if that pathway that you built is, I wake up and have a drink because that's what I do in the morning, or I wake up and have a cigarette, or I wake up and check my, my call sheet to see if my bets came in, and I'm in that habit, then that wiring will just get stronger and stronger and stronger the more you do it. Mm-hmm. So how do you do it? You've got to do it. You got to make a different path. And so in the beginning, the path feels very awkward, and you have to think about it. This is why it's so hard to stop. You have to use like a lot of the high energy part of your brain, the part that you use to concentrate and focus, and the big frontal lobes that can solve a lot of problems, but you have to use them. And so it's tiring, and it's not automatic, and you screw it up, and you're playing the song wrong. Or I'll give you a silly example. So we just got a new toilet commode in the bathroom, and because this one, it just couldn't be fixed. It was too old, and we couldn't get parts for it, so I had to get a new toilet. And the old one had the flush lever on the top. I've never seen that before. Just, it was old. And so you pull it up, and that's how you start the flush. And fortunately, I can't find one. So the ones have just the regular way, which is on the side of the tank. Yeah. So we've had this about a week, and man, I can't tell you how many times I've reached for the top of the tank because that's where it's been for years, but it's not there. So that's a good example of the path. It has nothing to do with substance use or anything else. It's just when you're used to something, you anticipate it, you expect it. I'm probably not even, coming out first thing in the morning, I'm not even thinking about it. It's just automatic, and there it is, but it's not there anymore. It's on the other side. So to make a new path, that's the not cocaine path. The reason we use cocaine is because we feel, there's a bunch of reasons, but we'll pick a couple, right? We feel lonely, want to be part of the party, want to feel energized and awake. It goes with the alcohol that we're drinking, right? I don't want to feel too drunk, so I add some cocaine. Those are a couple of reasons. So if you're going to do the non-cocaine life, you've got to figure out a different way to have more energy. So that may be not drinking, or it may be going to bed earlier, or it may be paying attention to your caffeine intake, or maybe eating better, or maybe exercising. All of those things take time, right? All of those things are high energy and a lot of effort. But if you do that over and over again, if you become a person who, my friend Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, who sets an alarm to go to bed, not an alarm to wake up, right?
I love that.
And then you become very, serious about your sleep habits, and you're serious about what you put in your body, and serious about exercise and taking care of yourself. Well, that guy or that girl is not going to use cocaine. But to get there, you have to put in this effort. You have to put in the time. You have to put in the repetitions. You have to do it. And so that's why it's hard. And I'm not saying it's easy to just go, oh, well, I just want to be one of the people who doesn't use cocaine anymore.
Right.
You have to keep showing up and keep doing it and keep putting in the time, and you might slip back, and then you got to rededicate. And so it's an effort. But when you get on the other side of it, you get to have this amazing life because you have had the experience of been through that. You've been a slave to whatever it was, to TikTok or whatever you're a slave to, and broken those chains and gotten free. And then now I'm not saying go get addicted so you can have this feeling, but for those of the people who've been through it, you know what I'm talking about. The freedom of not having to do the thing that you know is bad for you. That's a gift.
Absolutely. When I was working in the rooms of recovery, they would talk about phase 1 recovery, which is breaking the physical addiction, which is like kind of like what you described, right? It's implementing new habits. It's being very intentional. It's doing all those things. But phase 2 seems to address the deeper wound, right? I mean, you talked about growing up with a dad as an alcoholic. I had the same experience. And I know for me that left this hole. And it was after breaking the physical addiction that you have to get into like the deeper stuff of, okay, now how do I deal with the emotions that come up when I don't grab for the thing that I want that makes me feel better? Because those things still exist. So is there like phase 1 and phase 2 work here, or how do you conceptualize that?
Yeah. Once you get to that's a great question. So yeah, once you get to okay, I'm not using cocaine every day. Once you put in enough reps where you've broken free from that, there's a reason you used it in the first place. That's what you're talking about, right? So
yeah, and people are raw in this stage. I mean, they are a raw, like that myelin that you talked about. It's like they've got none of that left, and so every little poke right now feels very jarring too.
Yeah, all afraid nerves. Yeah. So it's back to the heart of the matter, which is, okay, so you've got, by the time people check into a treatment center, right, where we take care of a lot of people in treatment centers, they have two problems. They have the problem that brought them in, and then they have the problem that brought them to the problem. So whoever it was that developed a drinking problem, that's the person who is there, after a week or 10 days or something like that. Once the fog lifts, that's the person. And they're the medicine's gone. Right. The way they were managing their feelings, that's out the window. And that's where things get really interesting, because it's almost like you've turned back into soft Play-Doh, or you're back into the larval stage, right? You're not into this particular bug. You can go into that butterfly. You can be a different one, because the drive is still there. So that's what we're talking about. That's the compass. So the feeling of, I don't like the way this is. I don't want to be this way when I go back out in the world. This is part of why going into a protected environment, that's why being in a treatment center can be so helpful, or in a group where you have structure and other people on the same mission, and good counselors and therapists and doctors and nurses who are helping keep you on track in the beginning. It's very easy to go, you know what, this is too uncomfortable. If this is what not drinking or not using cocaine or not whatever the thing is that brought you in, if this is what that feels like, I don't know if I want to do this. And a lot of people wash out right there, and then have to have more experience until things get worse. And then they say, okay, well, what was that again about the map and the compass? Let me hear that again. So yeah, you're right. They when you get to that point, if you're at home listening to this, or in the gym listening to this, and you think, okay, well, I gave up the beer, but now I'm a raw bundle of nerves, you're at exactly the right spot. It's exactly the right place, because you're not going to stay there. You're not going to be like that permanently. It's not forever. This is a mistake we make in early recovery. We think the way I feel now is how I'm going to feel forever.
Right.
That's the same thing you feel when you're drunk. Like, oh my God, if I could just stay exactly like this forever, not more drunk, just this drunk would be perfect forever.
Yeah.
but nothing works that way, right? It's not, nothing is that way. So yes, that feeling of feeling like something's missing and that your life is in the toilet and you missed out on stuff, and then the guilt comes back about the things you let go, didn't show up for, or the consequences, right? The stuff you missed while you were out. All that comes back, and yeah, you can see why it's so important to come up with a new way of thinking about this. Because if you have a disease, then as soon as the phase one is passed, you feel really bad, because then
Mhm.
it's, oh my god, this is like this forever. No, no, no.
Well, yeah, and there's real problems in your marriage at this
Yeah,
stage. There's real
yeah,
problems in your relationships with your children. Maybe you have work consequences, financial
yeah,
implications, and looking in the rear view at this mountain that you now have to cross, and
yes,
this
package,
stuff
yes.
you have to clean up. It's tough.
I know. I know. I remember. Yeah, it's tough. And but you don't have to do it all at once. And it
Yeah,
didn't take it took a long time to accumulate all that stuff. It took a
absolutely.
long time to get yourself into the situation where you think that cocaine is we keep picking on poor cocaine. It's
Yeah.
just it's plant medicine, right? Cocaine. We keep picking on it, but
Yeah.
it's because it's a good example of something that's a short-term solution. But yeah, so there may be more. You may have more problems than you realize. There may be more to this, but ultimately the solutions are always straightforward and simple. So, right, show up, ask for help, tell the truth, and if you do that consistently, you're going to get better.
Hmm.
And the stark terror of facing the world without whatever your coping strategy was, without the significant other in your life who you lived for and who dumped you, and now they're now right now that drug is gone,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And that's sometimes the worst, right? Is a relationship ending.
Hmm.
If you are trying to get your self-worth out of someone else, which of course they can't give you, and then they're gone. So I know somebody going through that right now, and it's extremely painful because in that case you've asked the relationship to do something that it can't, just like you're asking the substances to do something that they can't. So you're let down a second time. One they the I heard a guy say that the heroin quit me before I quit it, which
Mm.
which is why you wind up needing help. And then why are you in that situation in the first place? Why are you in that situation in the first place? So in any case, yeah, you're right. And then there's the phase three recovery, or late stage recovery, where you get a different perspective on all of it. Have you come across that? Have you seen that? Where you become
Yeah.
grateful for
Was
disaster.
that's more, if I remember right, that's more of the spiritual
Yes.
reason behind it, right? And
Yeah.
finding
Yeah.
purpose and meaning.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Why me is what we say in the beginning, right?
Hmm.
And then uh, and then the middle stage is, why not me?
Hmm.
Because of the assumptions I made and how I conducted myself in life. Okay, well then that's why you get this disaster. And then the third phase is you realize why it's you, and it's so your story and your experience can help others.
Absolutely.
That's right. And you're
Yeah.
not you become, well, in my case, I became grateful for all that happened, because I didn't die. That was the best part. And then the second part was that this ridiculous story that I have that wound up being useful to a lot of people.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. And I feel the same way. I mean, when I look back at my childhood, I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had, because I don't just have book knowledge of, things that people go through. It's lived experience.
Mm,
And I think intimacy is a big part of that third phase too, because I think having a purpose
mm.
means that you've come into communion with yourself at a really deep level.
I love
And
I like that
I
a lot.
think
Yeah.
that is the experience that relationships can't give you and drugs can't give you, that we ask for, is,
Yeah.
how do I stop exiling or pushing away or rejecting parts of myself? It's how do I love all of it for exactly what it is? And for
Well,
me, that's what drives the meaning.
yeah. I mean, if you want to go deep, that's exactly what you're chasing when you don't feel safe. Is you're chasing yourself,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to feel lonely even when you're alone.
Mhm.
That's optional. And we talked about, what is there a root rupture? What is that? It's the belief that there's something wrong with you, and that you don't belong. That's the original sin, and which is fine. Everyone has that. Everyone doubts himself, and everyone feels like, well, I don't know if I'm up to it, or if I'm smart enough, or good looking enough, or if I can hang with the big dogs. The basketball finals are on, right? The NBA finals are on. You've got the two best teams duking it out today, and I'm sure they're wondering if they're up to it, right? They're can I play my best in this pressure cooker environment, and so life is like that, but that's fine. But when we think, okay, I actually don't belong, but I can fix it, that's where all the problems happen. That's what happened to me. I felt like I wasn't up to it, even though I was behaving like I was up to it. You wouldn't have guessed that from the outside.
Right.
All of which is fine. And if you were my counselor back then, and I said, Christy, I mean, looks like I'm doing okay, but I don't feel like I'm okay. You would have said, yeah, everyone has that. Everyone feels like he's not doing okay it's just no, it's normal.
Yeah.
But instead, I thought, okay, I'm not okay. I don't want to say that to Christy because she's going to confirm it, and then because she's a professional, and then it'll be real. So I'm gonna manage. I'm gonna try and figure out this way around to become okay, or make you think I'm, that to that what is it, that this way leads to hell. I mean, that's truly misery, is thinking there's something wrong with you, and being involved in the futile pursuit of trying to fix it when there isn't anything to fix. I say it's like this. It's like me looking for my glasses, right? You see my glasses?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that, right? Here they are. So yeah, that's bad. I've been there.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when you say there's nothing to fix, I believe that too. I mean, getting well,
Mhm.
finding yourself is never about accomplishing more, doing more, adding something to your life. It's usually about taking away, stripping down,
Yes.
getting vulnerable, getting emotionally naked in front of yourself and probably somebody else, because it's impossible to do it alone.
No, there's no one to witness you if you do it alone. Although you have to be present, usually somebody else has to be present also. And that's the representative of the universe, right? That's the representative of God. That person has the same makeup and the same limited life, and the same powerlessness and also awesomeness that you do. And so if you can be honest in the presence of somebody else, you're probably well on your way toward getting well. Because it doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't. That's not they're not thinking about you. Actually, that's the truth. They're not. They're thinking about themselves and their schedule and what they have to do. And so if you can say, oh, took drugs and here's what happened, or you can be honest about what's happening, you hear it. The important thing is that you hear yourself telling the truth, and no meteor lands on you. Like I said from before, there's no lightning bolt.
And it's wild because as you do it, it's like your capacity to tolerate those really uncomfortable feelings just grow and grow. And so it's almost like this unfolding a layer at a time until you get to the core, the center of exactly what you mentioned, which is that real early childhood belief of I'm not worthy, I'm not safe, I'm not enough. And whatever variation of that, somebody might carry inside of them that they feel is so shameful and so difficult to tolerate that they have to, bypass it. And for me, I've seen addiction energetically too. Like when I've sat in ayahuasca ceremonies and things like that, I could actually see what addiction looks like. And what it looks like is a bunch of gunk. It's darkness that are layers between you and your own core, you and your own divinity, you and your own heart, however you want to look at that.
Yeah. That checks out. That's how it feels. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like this tarry black substance that I've watched leave people's bodies, and it looks real interesting when it leaves. It looks like a lot of anger or fear or emotion or, these real strong, violent feelings. And you can actually see the imprints in people. And I've seen it in the rooms of recovery too. It just looks a little different in the jungle versus in the rooms of recovery. But the signature is something you can feel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It has a frequency. It has a, I don't know, vibe. That's what the kids say. And you can just feel it. You can just feel it. I was talking to a friend who has a family member who's fallen off, right? Who was supposed to be on the straight and narrow and isn't. And the person I was talking to said, I wanted to ask a bunch of questions, but I didn't need to. And you can feel it, right? It's
like visceral, right? Like for me, if a client were to present on my sofa with an addictive disorder that they didn't want to talk about, it hits me almost like in the gut.
Yes.
I can physically feel it.
Yes. They're not there. Or there's something. Yeah. But the way you described it is that makes sense. Yeah, it's because it's so to stay in that place, to stay in the place of doubling and tripling and 100xing down on this idea that you're not good enough, but that you can manage on your own with some kind of management strategy. That is so heavy, and it's so wasteful. It's not just wasting your time and your life, but it wastes your talents that you would be able to share with others. And so if we are light, which we are, then is darkness. And it completely makes sense why we should get, gummed up and sticky and covered, and because it just takes over. If you talk to people who are in the throes of this stuff, it just takes on a larger and larger part of your life. You're servicing this. It gets really expensive. That's the point of the route. Okay, you can shoot fentanyl again if you want to feel okay, but think about what that would cost. Think about what that would cost me at this point. So yeah, yeah, you make an excellent point. I didn't know about
Yeah.
that. Energetic.
And in today's day
You're
and
too,
age, something
yeah, you can see all
something
that.
like fentanyl, I mean, it costs kids their life. I mean, for so many now in this day and age, it's a short walk. It's dangerous to be an addict today.
Yeah, it's in everything. So it's getting a little bit better. The death rates are lower. There's some year over year. There's different reasons for that. Some of them are pretty dark in themselves, or reasons why their death rates may be going down. But overall, it's good that fewer people are dying. And but they're always working on something else. There's nitazene is the new one, and there kratom. People are using kratom and 7-hydroxykratom, and so the I'll say this: the human drive to try to find something. I don't think we're going to quench that. I think that's just human nature.
Yeah,
That's here to stay.
I think so too. So, for the addict still suffering,
Hmm?
for the person listening to this who is hearing some resonance and knows they need help, what are the first steps that somebody should take? Where should they look?
That's good. So, so for people with the couple that are kind of a little bit dangerous, if you just stomp on your own and that you want to talk to a doctor about before that, are quitting alcohol, any of the sedatives, anything that brings you down. So alcohol and the sleeping pills or the anxiety pills like Xanax or Ativan or Klonopin, those sorts of things. If you quit those abruptly, there's a danger of having a withdrawal seizure, and that can be very bad, and even death. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're drinking too much and you can't stop, drinking first thing in the morning, drinking to get through the night, if you become dependent on a overnight cycle with drinking, like keep a couple on the nightstand to get back to sleep, that situation, you probably should not quit on your own. You should talk to your doctor about that, because it's dangerous to stop. For the rest of the stuff, from smoking up to opiates, they're less dangerous, but they're hard to stick with. It's hard to right. It's hard to say, okay, I'm just going to stop. People do, but it's harder, and you can get help. And fortunately, this problem lends itself to a community approach. It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. We don't have a perfect solution, but the rooms of recovery are some of the best places you can go. Now, someone's going to say, "Well, I went and they told me this," and I understand. This is a lay organization. It's not professionals. It's people talking about their own experience. But in most cases, and now with the online meetings, if you cast about, you can find your tribe. You can find your group of people or couple of people or even one other person who you can be honest with, and who I promise you is not judging you for your experience. That alone goes a massive way. And then there's a huge overlap between mental health problems and substance use. And if you treat only the substance use, you might find you can't make much progress. Or right, there's this concept of self-medication where people are managing their feelings and their emotions with whatever they can find. Jumpy and anxious, they would take things to bring them down, like alcohol or these other pills we talked about, and etc. And we kind of ignored that. We said that, well, no, that's silly, the self-medication hypothesis, and so it fell out of favor. But it's kind of coming back, because if you talk to people that have mental health challenges, sure enough, they'll pick the things that help them, that make them feel less bad, I'll say.
Sure.
So if you're one of the, it's a lot. It's a huge percentage of people who have fleas and ticks, if you will, right? So you've got two reasons to be scratching. If you don't treat both, if you don't treat the mental health issues, and that's by talking to therapists, counselors, that sort of stuff, get a diagnosis, or get on track where you can get some help, whether or not that's medication, you're going to find it very hard to stay sober. So if you right? You have untreated depression, and you stop drinking, you're going to feel like drinking again, just because you'll feel, as you were talking about before, second stage, but extra miserable with all these things.
Oh,
So
completely. Are you familiar with internal family systems therapy?
yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah, I mean, they phrase that so well, right? I mean, we look at addictive disorders through an IFS lens as what they call a firefighter,
Right.
meaning it's something you do because you have a big feeling come up that you don't want to deal with. And so the drugs are just like this fire hose that you take to extinguish the feeling of usually a very young part of you who hijacks your nervous system, and you don't
Yes.
want to have to feel the pain of it. So, they call those parts exiles. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, when you just put the firefighter down, all your exiles are coming up and rearing their ugly heads, and all you have all these screaming children hijacking your nervous system. You've
Yep.
got to do something about that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Perfectly said. Yeah. Substances or any addictive behavior lets you be in two places at the same time. So you can be here, whatever that is, in your life, but also not here because you're loaded or distracted or in the zone with something else. And yeah, and when you bring yourself fully present to where you are, well, then you've got to deal with all of your feelings and all of your memories and all of your relationships, things that instead of having the difficult conversations or gaining a new perspective and insight and working through it, you've just been shoving in the closet, and then all that stuff comes out. Yeah.
That's
So
it. Yeah.
the good news is there's help now. Unfortunate, and also no one's going to be fighting you for the help because it's available all the way down to whether it's sliding scale or pay as you go, or a doesn't have any dues or fees. So the 12-step based and all the derivative ones after that, they don't have, you don't have to pay anything to find a kindred spirit that you can talk with about this stuff. And I remember when I checked into the treatment center, I was sure I was the only person that had fallen that far down, had gone, that far down the totem pole, as they say. And I was there for 3 months. And by the time I left, I had met 8 other anesthesiologists with the same story. And that's shocking that there are that many, but this was a treatment center for doctors. So no surprise. But over that period of time, it was very difficult for me to feel that different, or one of I was just kind of garden variety, ordinary occupational hazard in that thing. And I'm not minimizing it, but I didn't feel as bad as I felt going in, because I was able to gain perspective by talking to other people. And eventually, I mean, even when I was there, and I'm still friends with a guy who I was in treatment with, another anesthesiologist who I met a couple of weeks after I was there. We've stayed friends this whole time, almost 30 years. And even at that stage, with me just barely on solid ground, I was helpful to him. I said, listen, it's, you're going to get through this. It's going to be fine. And you're going to have a great life. And all of that was true. And it was based on my, couple of weeks experience. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, no, you make it. Yeah, you're so smart. You make excellent points about these things. It's completely true. The problems begin oftentimes when we stop. So brace for impact. Be prepared. That's normal. Yeah.
If people want to eventually read your book, what I'd love to know the title of it. When it comes out, we can link it in the show notes.
Sure.
And your TEDx talk.
Yeah, new map of recovery, and the TEDx is going to be in August. So it's August 22nd in Ohio, in Columbiana, Ohio. So that's where that's going to be, and then that'll be available on the TED channel. And so I have a book already. If you want to read the book I wrote called Outsmart Your Addiction, that's available on. There it is. Got the. Well, pick it up. Come on, pick it up.
It doesn't want to.
It says Outsmart Your Addiction, and that's on Amazon and so forth. And the new book coming out is all about this map business and the compass, new map of recovery. And that'll be wherever you can get books. Also working on getting out before Christmas.
Perfect. Dr. Giles, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your wisdom with our audience. I love this conversation. I love the way that you just simplify the solution. It just makes so much sense.
Well, keep up the great work you're doing. I know you're leading the field in your arena as well. And it's a pleasure to know such an awesome colleague. Thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right, everybody, until next time.